All right, so get this. You know how companies love to, take a stand these days?
Oh, yeah.
We're talking like Nike with Colin Kaepernick, Ben& Jerry's,
Hmm.
getting political.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. But
Wow.
we're going deep on some research that says all this corporate activism could actually be making some customers lie, cheat, and even steal.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, we're all used to thinking about boycotts, right?
Right.
Like if you don't like a company's stance, you just don't buy their stuff.
Right.
But this research goes deeper, like suggesting that the reaction can be a lot more personal and a lot less ethical.
Okay, so you're telling me that when brands preach politics, it can actually make their customers lie, cheat, and steal.
That's what the research is suggesting, yeah.
That's wild. So tell me more about this research. What are we looking at?
Well, the big one, the one we're really diving into today is from Kang and Kirmani,
Okay.
published just this year in the Journal of Business Ethics. And they found that when a company's stance like really clashes with your personal politics,
It can trigger this desire for revenge.
oh.
And that's where the unethical behavior comes
No,
in.
okay, hold on. So if I'm like super conservative
Yeah.
and a company comes out strong for, say, abortion rights,
hmm
I'm more likely to do something shady to get back at them.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the study used some really clever experiments to test this.
Okay.
They had people play this deception game where they could lie to a company employee to get more money.
Interesting.
So imagine you're playing this game and you have the chance to fudge some numbers to get a bigger bonus.
Okay.
Now, if you're already angry at the company for their stance on, let's say, climate change,
Yeah.
you might be way more tempted to cheat.
Wow. So it's like that feeling of when your team loses a game because of a bad call, you're so mad you just want to throw something at the TV.
Yeah.
But instead of chucking the remote, some folks are like wardrobing clothes or even shoplifting.
Yeah, that's what the research suggests.
And it gets even more interesting when we look at what the researchers call congruent activism,
Okay.
meaning when the company's stance matches your own beliefs, you're actually less likely to act unethically.
Wait, so if I'm all about climate action, the company is too, I'm going to be more honest.
Yeah.
It just seems like good old-fashioned guilt would keep me in line no matter what.
Right. But it's almost like you're rewarding the company for sharing your values. But remember, this isn't just about being a good person. The study found that this desire for punishment, or in this case, reward,
Right.
is a really powerful motivator. It's like a visceral emotional reaction, not just a rational decision.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more.
Yeah.
So how did the researchers actually prove that it's this desire for punishment
Yeah.
that's driving the unethical behavior? Couldn't it just be that people have like a negative attitude toward the brand and that's why they're acting out?
That's a great question. And the researchers were very careful to control for things like general brand attitude. And they actually found that the desire for punishment was a much stronger predictor of unethical behavior than just disliking the company.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's not just about being a disgruntled customer.
Right.
It's about feeling personally wronged and wanting to see the company suffer.
Exactly.
Right.
And they didn't just use the deception game. They also ran studies using wardrobing scenarios.
Okay.
So giving people the opportunity to like borrow clothes and return them just to see how the company's political stance influenced their behavior.
You know, I never really thought about it this way before. I guess we're all way more influenced by this stuff than we realize. So companies need to think twice before jumping on the activism bandwagon. Taking a stand could actually turn their customers into mini Robin Hoods.
That's one way to put it. But it's not quite that straightforward. The researchers found that there are some things that can like soften the blow of this incongruent activism.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Spill the tea. What are these magical loopholes that can keep customers from going rogue?
Well, one is something called stance consistency.
Okay.
So if a company known for being like super conservative suddenly goes all liberal or vice versa, people are actually less likely to punish them for it.
Wait, so you're saying if a company's known for being, say, anti-union and then suddenly starts singing the praises of organized labor,
Right.
people are less likely to punish them. That doesn't make any sense.
It seems counterintuitive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But think about it, that inconsistency makes it harder to categorize the company as purely good or bad. It creates this ambiguity that makes it harder to get riled up and act out.
Okay, I'm starting to see the logic there. It's like they've thrown everyone a curveball and now nobody knows how to react. Do you have any like real world examples of this?
Absolutely. Think about Walmart. Generally, they're perceived as a more conservative brand, rice.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But recently, they took a very public stance in support of abortion rights by expanding abortion coverage for their employees. So this move, which surprised many, could actually protect them from some of this backlash we've been talking about.
That's fascinating. So maybe companies can actually use this inconsistency thing to their advantage.
Yeah.
Like if they know a stance is going to be controversial, they can try to soften the blow by making it seem less predictable.
It's certainly a strategy worth considering, but it's a delicate balancing act. Companies need to be careful not to appear disingenuous or opportunistic.
For sure. So what's the other factor that can influence how people react to a company's stance? You said there were two, right?
Right. Yeah. The second one is the perceived immorality of the unethical behavior itself.
Okay.
So basically, there's a line that most people just won't cross,
Right.
even if they're like fuming mad at a company.
So even if I'm like ready to boycott a brand for, I don't know, using sweatshop labor,
Right.
I'm not going to rob them blind. There are limits to this revenge thing.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Wardrobing might feel like a relatively harmless way to kind of stick it to a company you disagree with.
Yeah.
But shoplifting, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
Most people would see that as crossing the line no matter how strong their feelings are.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you might fudge a number on your taxes if you disagree with how the government's spending money, but you probably wouldn't rob a bank, even if you thought you could get away with it.
Right.
There's a difference between a little white lie and a full-on felony.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And the researchers found this held up across like all different types of unethical behavior.
Okay.
People are more likely to lie or cheat a little, but they draw the line at actions that they see as truly wrong.
So basically, companies can breathe a sigh of relief knowing their customers aren't going to turn into a mob of shoplifters just because they disagree with their stance on gun control.
Well, not necessarily. While the most extreme behaviors might be less likely, companies still need to be very aware of the potential for even like minor unethical behavior to add up
Right.
and impact their bottom line.
Yeah, it's death by a thousand cuts.
Exactly.
So this whole thing makes me wonder, though, could companies actually use this congruent activism thing to their advantage?
Uh-huh.
Like if aligning with customer values can reduce unethical behavior,
Yeah.
could it also be used to promote positive actions?
Oh, that's a really interesting question.
Right.
Imagine a company known for sustainability launching a campaign that encourages their customers to reduce their environmental impact.
Mm-hmm.
If that message truly resonates with their target audience, could it actually lead to a decrease in things like littering or wasting resources?
It's like reverse psychology for good.
Exactly.
Instead of making people mad and driving them to do bad things, you inspire them to do good things.
Right.
I love it.
It's certainly an intriguing possibility, but as with any powerful tool, it needs to be wielded responsibly.
Right.
Companies would need to be incredibly sensitive to the nuances of their target audience's beliefs and values
For sure.
to avoid unintended consequences.
Yeah, you don't want to come off as preachy or manipulative. It has to be authentic. Speaking of authenticity, you mentioned earlier that the researchers also looked at what happens when companies stay silent on controversial issues. What did they find? Is silence golden?
Not really. It turns out that staying silent can sometimes be just as damaging as taking a stance that clashes with your customers' beliefs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in today's world, consumers increasingly expect companies to be like active participants in social and political discourse.
Right.
So staying silent can be interpreted as apathy or even complicity.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem.
Exactly.
But how can companies know where to draw the line?
Yeah.
On the one hand, they're facing pressure to speak out, but on the other hand, any stance they take could potentially alienate some customers.
It's a tough spot to be in, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think this research provides some like valuable insights for companies trying to navigate these challenges.
Okay.
For example, the study on stance consistency highlights the importance of authenticity. If a company is known for a particular set of values, suddenly shifting gears on a controversial issue can really backfire.
Yeah.
Consumers can spot hypocrisy a mile away.
So it's better to be consistent, even if it means taking a stand that might upset some people.
Well, consistency is key, but it's also important to remember that the perceived morality of the behavior itself plays a role.
Okay.
If a company takes a stand on an issue that is seen as like fundamentally ethical, like opposing child labor,
Mm-hmm.
they're less likely to face negative consequences even if some customers disagree with their stance.
That makes sense.
No.
People are more likely to forgive a company for taking a stand they disagree with if it's a stance that aligns with like a broader sense of morality.
Right.
So if you were advising like a CEO on how to approach this whole corporate activism thing,
Yeah.
what would you tell them?
Honestly, I would tell them to proceed with caution. Corporate activism isn't just a PR stunt.
Right.
It's a complex issue with real ethical and financial implications.
Yeah, it's not just about slapping a rainbow on your logo during Pride Month and calling it a day.
Exactly. It's about really understanding your values as a company, knowing your audience, and being prepared for the potential consequences, both positive and negative.
Mhm.
And remember, staying silent isn't always an option. Inaction can speak volumes, and sometimes it can be just as damaging as taking a controversial stance.
It's a tough balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
But that's the world we live in now.
Mm-hmm.
Consumers expect more from companies than ever before.
And this research just scratches the surface.
Yeah.
There's still so much we don't know about how corporate activism impacts consumer behavior.
Right.
I think there's a huge opportunity for more research in this area.
It'd be really interesting to see how this plays out in different cultures.
Yeah.
This study focused on American consumers,
Yeah.
where political ideology is such a huge part of the conversation. I wonder if the same dynamics would hold true in other countries.
That's a great point. And think about the long-term effects. Does a single instance of incongruent activism permanently damage a company's relationship with its customers? Or can that trust be rebuilt over time?
Right.
These are all important questions that deserve further exploration.
Totally. There's so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up, we've learned that corporate activism can have a really surprising impact on consumer ethics, often in ways that companies might not anticipate.
Right.
We've also seen that this effect is influenced by factors like political ideology, the perceived morality of the behavior, and even a company's history of taking a stance.
Uh-huh.
But here's a final thought for you to chew on.
Okay. I'm all ears.
In a world where consumers are demanding more and more from companies, how can businesses strike a balance between taking a stand and protecting themselves from unintended negative consequences? It's a tricky question with no easy answers.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that we'll all be grappling with for years to come.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of corporate activism and consumer ethics. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little bit unsettling.
Definitely thought-provoking.
If you've got thoughts on this research, share them in the comments. We'd love to hear your take. Until next time, stay curious,